For this video, I am going to quickly go over the process for background checks and clearances and whatnot for the federal government, and hopefully just give some insight into what's kind of a scary process, and it's a process that when I was searching online for resources, I wasn't finding a whole lot of information. So, uh, for if you're interested in getting a security clearance, you have to fill out what's known as the EQIP. Don't ask me what it stands for, but it's spelled EQIP. I know it's Electronic Questionnaire Information Package. It used to be paper, believe it or not, and it was like 100 pages long or 60 pages long, but like 100 plus questions, and it's your whole life. If someone put your whole life into a binder, that's the EQIP. The EQIP asks questions from cradle to literally from like birth until now. You have to do EQIP. So whether you're going to be working for the federal government, whether you're working for some sort of vendor, contractor, or maybe you're working for yourself and you got a government contract, you have to fill out the EQIP. It's the same system for everyone. It's conducted differently. It's done differently. For example, it's not your agency might not be the one doing it. Your agency might be hiring you, but they'll send the work off to another agency, right? Which is what happened in my case, where for my EQIPs, sometimes the agency did it, or sometimes they had some other agency handle the investigations. So if you're being considered for federal employment or federal contract, you'll have to put your information to the EQIP. And not anyone can just get a clearance, right? You have to have a reason to get a clearance. The EQIP is only given, they only create access or credentials for someone, create a file for someone, if someone is being considered for employment, or if there's some need. So if you have a contract with an agency, that agency has to sponsor you. If you're doing work for the DoD, right? If you're working at Raytheon or Boeing, you'll have some point of contact in your company who will help you, guide you through the process. But yeah, there has to be some justification. The government does not allow people to just apply for clearances. Someone asked me, hey, can I just apply for security clearance? And I was like, no, you can only get a clearance if there is a need for you to get a clearance. And the government is aware of that need, and whoever knows that you have that need, the people you'll be doing the work for, their responsibility is to sponsor you and do everything they need to do. I don't have too much insight into that process. But all I know is that the EQIP will only be offered to you if you're being considered, seriously considered. And it's only a necessity. They don't make a habit of just allowing anyone to do it. There's a few steps you have to go through first in order to get to that point. But the EQIP is this online portal. So what happens is someone sends you an email with your login credentials. It might be a username. It might be some temporary password, something like that. But they send you credentials. You go to the website, and because the website now knows that you're going to be accessing your application, your credential, you'll be able to make an account, a username, a password, and fill out the questionnaire. The questionnaire differs based on what sort of clearance you need. So, for example, there's the SF85P, the standard form 85P. That's for like public trust or confidential level clearances. Maybe secret, I'm not positive, because secret's sort of like in the middle, right? You have public trust and confidential, then you have secret, then top secret sensitive compartmentalized information, TSSCI. But SF85P, standard form 85P, all that means is that your EQIP will ask certain questions, but it might not go into as much detail as SF86 version of it, which is standard form 86, SF86. That is the version of the EQIP that is for top secret clearances or top secret sensitive. Or there's even other forms of clearance. I think there's something called L access or L clearance or Q clearance. I think those are for people who work at like nuclear plants, something like that. So yeah, you're being considered for employment. Someone sends you an email. You follow the link. You go to the EQIP website, and you're able to make an account because it has your social. It knows that you're here to make. It has your information ahead of time. It knows that you're here to make an account to fill in your questionnaire, and your questionnaire will vary. Some people's questionnaires are more detailed. That's because they're probably getting top secret, and if it's less detailed, then it's probably because you're getting SF85P. All that means is that the EQIP is the same portal for both people. Regardless of clearance, it's the same portal, but the detail, for example, Top secret might ask you, what have you been doing for the last 10 years employment wise, but the public trust might ask you, what have you been doing for the last 7 years. Now, it's not much of a difference, right? If you have to go back 7 years or 10 years, that's still a lot. If you have to show last 5 years of residences or 10 years, that's still a lot. If you have to put down all your neighbors' information for the last 5 years versus 10 years, again, that's a lot. And the equip, it goes through everything. It will ask you for your high school teachers' information. If you're in college, you're gonna need people from high school, right? At least your senior year of high school. If you turn 18 during high school, everything from 18 onwards, or if you're 18, I think it even asks you for the last 2 years. So, for example, if you're in high school and somehow you got a job that needs top secret clearance, like you're 18 years old. I shouldn't say if you're in high school. If you're 18 years old, the clearance will not ask you, hey, tell us what you've been doing since you turned 18. They'll say, okay, if you're 18, give us the 2 years prior. So tell us what you've been doing since you were 16 in terms of jobs, in terms of social life, in terms of residences. But then if you're above 18, I think they allow you to just go from 18 onwards. So, for example, when I did my equip, it asked to go back 10 years. But I think, I only had to go up to like when I was 18 onwards, because that fell within the scope of like, the decade or what so that they were looking for when I did my equip. So they ask for, where were you born, who are your siblings, who are your parents, where do you live, how long have you lived there, who knows you lived there. And none of this is secret information, by the way. If you Google the forms for top secret clearance, the SF-86 PDF, they have a PDF. You don't fill out a PDF, though. You fill out the electronic version of the questionnaire. But what it does is it takes your answers and puts it into a PDF anyway. It generates a PDF at the end of your submission. It's very detailed. They'll ask you about college. They'll ask you what semester you were attending college. They'll ask you who was your advisor. Can we get their information to show that you were going to school in person? We want to talk to some classmates, your jobs. We want to talk to your bosses. We want to talk to your coworkers. We want to know why you left the job. We want to know where was the job located, where is the college located, where was your high school located, when did you graduate, give us the exact date or roughly the exact date, who was your high school guidance counselor, tell us about your neighbors, who knows how long you've been living there, tell us about your friends, who can talk about your professionalism. And this is frustrating because the whole time you're filling out your application, some people think they can hide something. You cannot hide anything. People will, if you had a job during your winter break of college between semesters, the agent doing your investigation will find out. Anywhere your social security number was used, they will find out. They will know every credit card you have, so list all your credit card debt. They will know every job you've had, so list the job. Even if you had it for one day, you have to list the job. You have to list how you left that job. You have to list what your duties were. You have to give phone numbers for everything, which is hard. It's hard when you had a job 10 years ago and you need your manager's phone number. It's hard when you had a job 10 years ago and you don't, or 8 years ago, and you don't remember when you started or when you finished. You just know roughly, like I started in the spring and I was there until fall, but you don't know for sure. It's hard if you do consulting and you have to list your clients, especially because some clients don't like the government sniffing around their operations. So, and same goes for companies, really. I mean, established companies, they don't like it when you worked there 7 years ago and as a cashier or something, and now you're applying for a job and they're like, we don't remember this guy. We don't keep track of our cashiers. We don't, a few years after people leave, we just don't have records on them. And that's what happened to me, where like when we were going back 5+ years, my history started getting more difficult. I had to dig up phone numbers. I had to go through old emails. I had to find people's names on Facebook, and it was hard. It's hard. The further back you go, the more disastrous it becomes. It's also tough because of COVID. I mean, COVID will really affect your equip, because you'll be thinking about who was your boss at some companies, and you'll find out that person passed away. Okay, and then you'll run into a case where you'll find out multiple people in your history are gone. Sometimes you lose touch with friends. You don't have their current phone numbers. You have their name, but you don't know where they live now. You've lost touch. You don't know their phone number, but they can vouch for you, and you're just like, what do I put? So it's a very frustrating process. I don't even know. I don't even know how many people have gone through it and have been satisfied, but I know how many people have gone through it and have not been happy, and that's basically everyone I've spoken to. It takes hours. If you've done international travel, your equip will be longer. They will ask you when you left, exactly what day you left, what day you came back. They will ask you who you were visiting, where you were staying, and that's hard. It's hard when you're traveling and all you know is that you stayed at a certain hotel, but you don't remember the address. And then, sometimes you don't remember the exact dates. If you traveled somewhere 5 years ago, you have to go dig up your passport and you have to look at, like, on the page where they stamped your departure and arrival. You have to look at those. Um, and the equip ask questions that are sometimes tricky. For example, I've traveled internationally, and they asked, "Oh, while traveling internationally, did you ever interact with police or something?" And I'm just like, "Well, what does that mean?" Because there's a lot of police at the airport. I mean, I interacted with them, but what the equip means is, I guess, were you ever detained? But it's the wording is a little bit outdated. It needs to be improved a little bit. There's so many questions that just they're they're hard to answer. They'll ask you questions that are they ask me questions about all my family members, and I remember, I think when you're listing your family members, they double check or ask you, just making sure this person is still alive. And I was like, what? Yeah, they're still alive. Why would I put someone who's not alive? But I think my equip asked me that because some answers were from former questionnaires. So I think they were asking, are they still alive? But I found that a little interesting. But everything about your life. I mean, they will ask you, people who know you personally, professionally, and these agents, they go through with a fine tooth comb. They will show up at your place of worship. They will show up at your school. They will show up at your friends' workplaces, and they will talk to them. They will talk to them in libraries. They will talk to them in stores. They don't just arrive and say, we're going to talk now, but they'll try to make appointments, and they'll call, and you never know the name of the person investigating it. They're not going to introduce themselves to you until they interrogate you, or interview you. I shouldn't say interrogate. So I would fill out the equip, and I would tell my friends, hey, just so you know, I'm being considered for federal employment. Just be on the lookout for some agent might interview you. And they'll say, okay, who's going to interview me? I'll say, I don't know. They're like, is it man or woman? I don't know. What's their name? I don't know. Who do they work for? I don't know which agency is actually doing the investigation. When are they going to talk to us? I don't know. What's their phone number? I don't know. What's their email? I don't know. It's like, then how do you know someone's going to even, like, what? What is, you have no information. I'm like, I've had investigations where the agent met my friends first and then met me. I've had investigations where, honestly, I never even met the agent. We did everything virtually, I guess, because of COVID. But it depends. You'll meet them in person. You'll meet them virtually. But they go through everything. I mean, every semester of college, if you took a break from college, you have to say what you were doing during that break. Employment, if they'll go back the last 10 years for your employment. If you have a break in your employment, if you were unemployed for a few weeks, you have to list it. If you were unemployed for a few months, you have to list it, and you have to prove you're unemployed. That can be a headache. It can be a headache if you have some break between jobs, because not everyone's going to remember. So, for example, say you quit one job in September and you joined another job in October, and you were just taking a few weeks off to relax. Like, you were onboarding for the other job, you knew you basically had it, and you wanted like a little bit of breathing room, so you gave like a 3-week notice instead of 2 weeks notice, and just took some time to yourself. Nobody's even going to remember. People are going to be like, no, I think he was working during that time, and the agent's going to be like, interesting, he was working and he said he was unemployed. So when it comes to specifics, people's memory can sometimes be unreliable, and that can make the equip a little bit tougher. And the exact dates for traveling definitely hurts, because not everyone saves their tickets or hotel reservations. And they're always very interested in, like, I had someone whose equip was frustrating because he lived in Michigan, and he lived in his family lived in Jersey, and what he would do is he would come home from Michigan and pass through Canada to come home. And during the equip, he had to put foreign travel for all these little visits. And they asked him, hey, how come you were going to Canada so many times? He's like, to just drive through it to Michigan. But yeah, he had to list that as a travel. So every time he went through Canada, even if he was driving through it, he had to put that, I visited a foreign country. So a lot of things can be headaches, but it does what it's meant to do. It goes through people's history. It gets all of their information. I'm very understanding of the purpose of the equip, that while it is very detailed, it does have a purpose, and I think it does that purpose quite well. A little too well, to the point that I know people who should. It's not my place to judge who should get a clearance or not, but I know people whose backgrounds were clean, but sometimes the equip gets a little tripped up over inconsistencies, or if the agent doesn't, if they feel like something is off, they sometimes reject the clearance, which is unfortunate. But I think it's better if they withhold clearances that should be awarded rather than give away clearances that should not have been awarded. Um, so yeah, you fill out this massive online questionnaire. You go through every section. You fill in every blank, and then at the end you submit it. And once you submit it, you cannot edit it. Once you submit your equip, you cannot edit it, and that's it. It's out of your hands. Then they go through your credit. They fingerprint you, if needed. Some clearances need a fingerprint, some don't. Um, but yeah, the equip portion is it's just a very detailed online questionnaire. Um, After you submit it, then people in your life will be reached out to by agents who are sometimes they're federal employees, and sometimes they're contractors, they're external vendors who are retained by the government. They talk to your family, they talk to you, they just get your they'll just address anything that didn't make sense. So, for example, if you have some credit card debt issues, that's something that the agent might speak with you and be like, "Hey, what are you doing to manage your credit card debt?" And if you're managing your debt, that's fine. But I know the government does not like giving a clearance to someone who's vulnerable. And if you're doing drugs or alcohol problems and it's on your equip, or worse, it's not on your equip, please disclose anything you have. But if you have mental health problems that are severe, they might bring it up. If you have drug issues, they might bring it up. They might bring up alcohol problems. No one wants to give a clearance to someone who has addiction issues, substance problems. If there's any behavioral problems, I mean, if you're someone with anger management, they might be like, "Hey, everyone here says that, at the last Super Bowl you were punching the TV because you lost a bet. Uh, is that hyperbole? Is your friend someone who exaggerates, or is that something we need to worry about?" So the agent will touch every concern they have with the equip. If you have multiple citizenships, they might ask you, "Hey, would you be willing to give these up to only have your allegiance to the U.S.?" So all sorts of stuff. I mean, there's red flags you might not even think about. Like, they might talk to you and be like, "Hey, man, your first few jobs you kept getting fired, and it might be minimum wage jobs you had like during college that you didn't care about, and you just did them for fun, or you quit them on the spot just impulsively." Unfortunately, even if you're like older, you might have to justify yourself and say, "Look, I was young, I was a kid, I was just, I didn't always quit my jobs properly, but it's not that I'll join the government and then just leave huffing and puffing and waste everyone's time," because nobody wants to give a clearance to someone who has a history of just leaving their job after a few months or something. Like, that's not a good look, right? Then why go through this whole process? The equip for public trust or confidential can take like 6 months to a year, and then secret takes about 6 months to a year as well, if done properly. If you miss stuff and they have to reissue the questionnaire or have you fill in, not edit it, you can't really edit it, but like, they'll basically regenerate it. What that means is you can't choose to edit it, but if you missed a lot of stuff, like meaningful stuff, they're gonna like basically reject it, and you have to do it again, and it doesn't look good because the rejection does show. But yeah, so if you do equip properly, you can get a secret clearance or public trust or something like under a year. And if you mess up, if you hide stuff, if you forgot stuff, if there's things that are concerning and maybe they need to be mitigated, they can take longer. And then top secret, even if you do everything right, I think top secret takes about 2 years. I know there's a backlog, and I know it's a very, very frustrating. I've dealt with the process before. I've never had a top secret clearance. I've never had any clearance, actually. I think all my jobs have been like public trust or confidential. And when that happens, they don't really tell you what clearance you have. You just have something. But secret and above are the ones that are actually considered like clearances, and I've never had any of those. But yeah, you do. So you do the online questionnaire. It's very detailed. Hopefully, you only do it once. You speak to an agent. They talk about areas of concern. Sometimes there's fingerprinting involved. You have to go to a police station or go somewhere like an army base. I had to go recently to some army center and get fingerprinted. And yeah, then you just wait. Sometimes you get an interim clearance. So after everything checks out, you get a temporary clearance, also known as interim clearance. And that clearance is usually good for about 180 days. And then you have to get it renewed. And the hope is that, basically the investigator doesn't have enough information or doesn't know enough yet to give you a final clearance, but they have enough to give you something temporary. And obviously these findings are shared with your agency. So whatever they know, your agency will know. And likewise, if your agency says, "Hey, we have some questions for you to award you, clearance, like we have some things we need to mitigate or help us understand or just explain some things," they'll give you the opportunity to do so. Sometimes it's called adjudication or something. It's not none of this is guaranteed. Like nothing I've mentioned, it's all hypothetical. Like if you get the job, then you might get the equip. If you get the equip, you might hear from the agent. Sometimes the equip is just so disastrous they don't even bother. They just say, okay, we're gonna cut our losses. So then you might talk to the agent. Agent might send you for fingerprinting. Fingerprinting might get you interim clearance. Interim clearance might lead to final clearance, and vice versa. I mean, sometimes it doesn't lead to final clearance, and sometimes you don't get interim clearance, but it still leads to a full clearance. So if the guy has enough information for interim clearance, the agency will award it. But then there's also times where they don't. There's times where your interim clearance is denied, and the agency can either pull the job offer, which sucks, or they tell you to wait, and you're not working in this time. Like you don't work for them yet. You're just a candidate. They'll tell you to wait until a full clearance is awarded, and it might take a year or two. But anything can happen. There are people who have gone to temporary clearance and they didn't get the final. And then there's people who have, and unfortunately what happens is sometimes people get a temporary clearance and something happens in their life which affects them. They might get gambling debts or something. They might have huge bills. They might go through divorce or something material changes in their life. And unfortunately, they become a less attractive candidate or they become more vulnerable as a possible employee. So some people get interim clearance, but then because the investigation takes a year, anything can happen. People's lives go upside down and then they don't get the final. And then likewise, some people have not gotten the interim because their application, their paperwork is kind of messy, or someone made a stupid joke to the agent and now the agent has a bad idea about you. But then people are able to redeem themselves and get a final clearance like a year or two later. It's sometimes a surprise. Some people get surprised when they get it. So that's just some information on the ECRIP process. It's very involved. It's very detailed. You would not believe, like your neighbors, you will have to put down all of their information. Like phone numbers, sometimes emails. I remember having to find emails for people. I'm like, I don't know their email address. And likewise, I have to find phone numbers for people I don't know. So definitely, wherever you go, whenever you're working somewhere, save all your information. If you meet someone, save all the information. Because you have no idea that the neighbor who moved away 7 years ago might actually be a good reference. And now you need to find out who they are so you can put them on the equip. As far as references go, I mean, I think I had like 8 plus. And yeah, it's a little scary. I took online classes in college, and this is a tangent, but I took online classes in college, and my advisor was asked by the agent, "Hey, was Muhammad in the country?" Sorry, Muhammad. Why did I say it the white way, Muhammad? He asked, "Was Muhammad in the country?" And my advisor was just like, "I don't know how to answer that because like I don't know definitely if he was here. Like he was enrolled in the school. That's all I can say. I cannot tell you where he was." So it's just small stuff like that. Like the process is hard on you. It's very involved, but it's actually everyone involved is going to have some hand in it, have some work to do, and it can be tough for them as well. But yeah, with that said, if anyone has any questions, I'll try to answer them as best I can. I don't want to pretend I'm a resource. I've never conducted the investigations or anything like that. I'm just someone who's gone through multiple equips. I mean, I've gone through equips for jobs I was considered for. So while I've worked for 3 federal agencies, I've gone through equips for the Bureau of Engraving and Printing twice. I've gone through equip for DISA, the Defense Information Systems Agency. I've gone through the equip for the Army. I've gone through it, like 7, I think at least 7 times. So I consider myself a little bit of a guru, at least in terms of filling it out and just being familiar with the process. Not to mention, I've gone through the process very recently. It's hard to find people online who've done the equip recently. There used to be a forum called the Federal Soup Forum. It's been decommissioned like as of last month, but they had a lot of information that I used just navigating the process because the website is just a little bit hard to intuit. It's not too user friendly. It's very polished looking, but you don't really know how to click next sometimes, or sometimes if you have an error, it won't tell you what the error is. You have to find out, is there a box that I missed out? Or is there a box where maybe, for example, your phone number, you might need to put it a certain way. Maybe you need to put dashes, but then your social security number on the same page, you're not supposed to put any dashes. So you never know what you're doing. But with that said, I hope that just gives you a little bit of feedback or a little bit of background context into what is the equip, how do you get access to the equip, how do you apply for a clearance, and what steps are there when it comes to that.